The morning sun peeked through the curtains of a modest one-bedroom apartment in downtown Manhattan as Mei Lin stretched and got ready for another day of teaching. Her small but cozy home was filled with children's artwork, carefully hung on the walls, precious gifts from her kindergarten students over the years. She smiled at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, adjusting her straight black hair into a neat ponytail. Her wedding ring caught the light, and she paused to look at it lovingly. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but to her, it was the most beautiful piece of jewelry in the world. Her husband, David Wu, had given it to her 3 years ago when they got married in a simple ceremony at City Hall. The sounds of the city were already in full swing as Mei Lin prepared her breakfast, just some toast and coffee. She could have hired a personal chef or ordered from any fancy restaurant in the city, but that wasn't her style. Even after marrying one of the most successful businessmen in New York, she insisted on living like she always had. "Another beautiful day," she whispered to herself, packing her lunch in a reusable container. Her colleagues at Rainbow Kids Elementary often teased her about bringing lunch from home when she could easily eat at expensive restaurants, but they didn't know her secret. None of them knew that her husband was the brilliant mind behind Wu Innovations, a tech empire worth billions. As she walked to the subway station, Mei Lin greeted Mr. Rodriguez, the elderly newspaper vendor who had been her morning companion for the past 5 years. "Good morning, Mr. R. How's your granddaughter doing in college?" Ms. Mai. She's doing great. Got all A's this semester." He beamed with pride, handing her the daily newspaper. She always bought one from him, even though she could read everything on her phone. Some traditions were worth keeping. The subway car was crowded as usual, but Mei Lin didn't mind. She stood holding onto the overhead rail, watching the mix of people around her: office workers in suits, students with backpacks, artists with their portfolios. This was the real New York she loved, not the glossy version shown in magazines. Her phone buzzed with a message from David. "Hope you have a wonderful day teaching, love. Don't forget we have dinner plans tonight." She smiled, remembering how they first met. It wasn't at some fancy gala or through mutual rich friends. No, their story was much more special. 3 years ago, Mei Lin had been organizing a fundraiser for her school's art program. She had visited dozens of local businesses, hoping for donations. When she walked into a small coffee shop to take a break from all the rejections, she accidentally spilled her drink on a man working on his laptop. That man was David, though she didn't know it at the time. Instead of being angry, he had helped her clean up the mess, and they ended up talking for hours. He told her he was in tech, but didn't elaborate. She shared stories about her students and her passion for teaching. He was captivated by how her eyes lit up when she talked about helping children learn and grow. It wasn't until their third date that she discovered who he really was, and by then, she was already falling for the kind, humble man who listened to her stories and shared her love for simple pleasures. When David proposed 6 months later, they made a deal. They would keep their marriage private, living modestly and focusing on what truly mattered to them. The subway doors opened at her stop, and Mei Lin hurried up the stairs, waving to the familiar faces of parents dropping off their children at school. Her classroom was on the first floor, already buzzing with energy as early arrivals colored at their desks. "Ms. Lin, Ms. Lin." Little Sophia ran up to her, holding a slightly crumpled drawing. "I made this for you. It's you teaching us about butterflies." The crayon artwork showed a stick figure with a black ponytail surrounded by colorful butterflies and smiling children. "This is beautiful, Sophia. Should we hang it with the others?" Mei Lin carefully pinned the drawing to the Our Art Gallery wall, making sure it was at perfect eye level for the children to see. This was why she continued teaching despite having access to unlimited wealth. These genuine moments of connection and joy were priceless. As more students filled the classroom, Mei Lin thought about how different her life could be. She could be living in a penthouse, attending charity galas, and shopping at designer stores. Instead, she chose to keep wearing her comfortable clothes from regular stores, taking the subway, and spending her days helping young minds grow. The morning routine began as it always did, with the children sitting in a circle for story time. Today's book was about a little bird who learned that being different was something special. As she read, doing different voices for each character, Mei Lin noticed how engaged her students were, their eyes wide with wonder. "Who wants to tell me what they learned from the story?" she asked, and dozens of little hands shot up eagerly. This was what wealth meant to her, not the money in her husband's bank accounts, but the rich tapestry of experiences and connections she built every day. During lunch break, her colleague Jin popped into the classroom. "May, you won't believe what I saw on my way to school today. A woman driving a Ferrari dropped off her kid at the private school across the street. Can you imagine having that kind of money?" Mei Lin just smiled and opened her homemade lunch. "Money isn't everything, Jin. I'm happy with my subway rides and packed lunches. Besides, I get to spend my days with these amazing kids. That makes me feel like the richest person in the world." What Jin didn't know was that Mei Lin and David owned that private school building, along with several others in the city. But Mei Lin had chosen to teach at Rainbow Kids Elementary because it served families from all walks of life. Here, she could make a real difference in children's lives, regardless of their background. As the afternoon sun filled the classroom, Mei Lin helped her students with their art projects. Today, they were making family trees, and each child had a unique way of representing their loved ones. Some drew elaborate branches with dozens of relatives, while others had small, intimate families. She made sure every child felt proud of their creation, knowing that family came in all shapes and sizes. The final bell rang, and as parents came to pick up their children, Mei Lin received countless hugs and goodbye, Ms. Lin calls. She stayed behind to prepare for tomorrow's lessons, just like any other teacher. The janitor, Mr. Thompson, passed by with his mop. "Still here, Ms. Lin? You work harder than anyone I know." "I love what I do, Mr. Thompson. When you love your work, it doesn't feel like work at all," she replied, arranging tomorrow's craft supplies. She didn't mention that she had personally funded the school's entire art supply budget for the year, anonymously of course. As she packed up her bag, Mei Lin looked around her classroom one last time. The walls were covered with children's artwork, learning materials, and photos of class activities. This was her real world, not the high-rise offices where her husband made his business deals, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Walking back to the subway station, she thought about how her students' parents sometimes apologized for not being able to afford better school supplies or class trip fees. Little did they know that their children's teacher was married to one of the city's wealthiest men. But that wasn't what mattered to Mei Lin. What mattered was creating a safe, nurturing space where every child could learn, grow, and dream big, regardless of their background. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a reminder about their dinner plans tonight. David had mentioned something special about their 3rd anniversary coming up, but Mei Lin was content with their usual celebration, take-out food, and watching the sunset from their apartment's small balcony. After all, true happiness wasn't about fancy restaurants or expensive gifts. It was about being true to yourself and making a difference in others' lives. The morning of their 3rd anniversary started like any other day, except for the small velvet box sitting on Mei Lin's dresser. Inside was her grandmother's vintage ring, a delicate piece that had traveled with her family from Shanghai to America decades ago. The ring needed cleaning, the gold had dulled over the years, and the tiny pearls didn't shine like they used to. "I should get this cleaned before dinner tonight," Mei Lin thought, carefully wrapping the ring in a soft cloth. David had mentioned taking her somewhere special for their anniversary, though he wouldn't say where. That was just like him, always planning little surprises while respecting her wish to live simply. After her morning classes, Mei Lin had her lunch break to visit Elite Gems on 5th Avenue. She'd chosen this store because they advertised specialized cleaning services for vintage jewelry. The building itself was intimidating, all gleaming glass and polished marble, with doormen in crisp uniforms standing guard. Mei Lin smoothed down her favorite sweater, a comfortable blue one she bought on sale last year, and adjusted her practical canvas tote bag. She noticed a few raised eyebrows from people entering the store in their designer clothes, but she was used to that. Living in Manhattan had taught her that some people judged books by their covers. The interior of Elite Gems was even more impressive than the outside. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections across display cases filled with diamonds that cost more than her yearly salary. Not that she needed her teaching salary, but she proudly donated most of it back to her school's programs. A group of well-dressed women huddled around a counter, examining what looked like an engagement ring. Their laughter echoed through the store as they discussed yacht parties and summer homes. Mei Lin waited patiently, holding her grandmother's ring close. Finally, a sales associate approached her. The woman, whose name tag read Crystal, gave Mei Lin's outfit a quick once-over, her perfectly penciled eyebrows rising slightly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she doubted she could. "Yes, please," Mei Lin smiled warmly, unwrapping her grandmother's ring. "I'd like to have this cleaned. It's very special to me. It belonged to my grandmother." Crystal picked up the ring with 2 manicured fingers, holding it at arm's length as if it might be contaminated. "Oh, vintage," she said, making the word sound like a disease. "Let me get my manager. We have to be careful with these older pieces." The manager, a tall woman with platinum blonde hair who introduced herself as Victoria, strutted over. She barely glanced at Mei Lin before focusing on the ring. "This is quite worn," she announced loudly, drawing attention from nearby customers. "The cleaning service for vintage pieces is quite expensive. Are you sure you can afford it?" Mei Lin felt her cheeks warm, but kept her voice steady. "Yes, I can. Could you tell me the price, please?" Victoria named a figure that was clearly inflated. Mei Lin had researched the service online beforehand. Around them, the group of women who had been looking at engagement rings had stopped their conversation to watch the scene unfold. One of them pulled out her phone, pretending to text but obviously recording the interaction. "That seems higher than the price listed on your website," Mei Lin pointed out politely. Victoria's smile turned cold. "That's our standard rate for special cases. We need to take extra precautions with items of uncertain origin." She emphasized the word uncertain while glancing meaningfully at Mei Lin's simple clothes and worn tote bag. A well-dressed man examining watches nearby snickered. Maybe she could try the jewelry cleaner at the drugstore instead, he stage whispered to his companion, who giggled behind her hand. Mei Lin stood her ground, though her heart was racing. "I'd like to speak to someone else, please. This ring has been in my family for generations and I—" "Listen," Victoria cut her off, raising her voice enough that everyone in the store could hear. "This is a late gems. We cater to a certain clientele. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the smaller shops in Chinatown." She stressed the last word with a smirk, making her prejudice crystal clear. The woman with the phone was now openly filming, probably hoping to catch some drama for her social media. Other customers had stopped browsing to watch, most wearing expressions of either amusement or second-hand embarrassment. "I'm a paying customer," Mei Lin said quietly but firmly. "I'd appreciate being treated with respect." Victoria's face hardened. "Security," she called out, gesturing to a man in a dark suit who had been standing by the door. "Please escort this person out. She's making our other customers uncomfortable." The security guard approached, looking somewhat uncomfortable with the situation. He was young, probably new to the job, and seemed unsure about removing someone who hadn't actually done anything wrong. "Ma'am, please come with me," he said apologetically, reaching for Mei Lin's elbow. Mei Lin carefully rewrapped her grandmother's ring, her hands steady despite her humiliation. The women with their phones were still recording, probably hoping she'd make a scene. But that wasn't her way. She held her head high, remembering all the lessons she taught her kindergarteners about dignity and respect. As the security guard began to lead her toward the door, she caught her reflection in one of the gleaming display cases. She saw what they saw: a young Asian woman in simple clothes, carrying a worn tote bag. But she also saw what they didn't: a person of worth, regardless of appearance or wealth. The bright sunlight of Fifth Avenue was just visible through the store's massive front doors. Mei Lin could already imagine herself walking out, going back to her classroom, and telling David about this over dinner. He would be upset, of course, but she would remind him that experiences like these only made her more determined to teach her students about kindness and acceptance. Just then, the store's doors swung open and a familiar figure stepped in. Mei Lin's heart skipped a beat as she recognized her husband's silhouette against the bright background. She wasn't the only one who recognized him. The entire atmosphere in the store shifted instantly, like a change in air pressure before a storm. David Wu stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in one of his rare business suits, the same suit he wore for major company announcements and board meetings. The suit that had been on the cover of Business Weekly when Wu Innovations went public. And now, standing in elite gems, he was about to create another memorable moment, though not the one he had originally planned for their anniversary. Victoria's voice rang through the silent stall like a cracking whip. "Mr. Wu, what an unexpected honor!" Her entire demeanor transformed instantly, her face lighting up with a practiced smile. But before she could continue, her eyes darted between David and Mei Lin, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. The young security guard who had been about to escort Mei Lin out quickly stepped back, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The group of wealthy women who had been recording the scene on their phones were still filming, but their smug expressions had been replaced by looks of confusion. "I believe," David said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made everyone in the store stand straighter, "that you were about to remove my wife from your establishment." The color drained from Victoria's face so quickly that she had to grab the counter for support. "Your wife," she stammered, her eyes darting again to Mei Lin in her simple sweater and worn bag. The woman who had been most actively filming suddenly lowered her phone, but David raised his hand. "No, please continue recording. This is something people should see." His words weren't angry, but they carried such authority that no one dared to move. "I came here early to surprise my wife," David continued, moving to stand beside Mei Lin. "We had planned to meet for our anniversary dinner, but I thought, why not start the celebration earlier? I wanted to watch her face when she saw the special display I had arranged." He gestured to a private showing room visible through glass doors, where a velvet-covered table stood prepared with what was clearly an elaborate jewelry presentation. Victoria's assistant, Crystal, began backing away slowly, trying to make herself invisible behind a display case. The man who had made the snide comment about drugstore jewelry cleaners was now intently studying his shoes, his face red with embarrassment. "Mr. Wu, I had no idea. We didn't know." Victoria's voice had lost all its previous condescension, replaced by panic. "If you had just told us who you were," she directed this at Mei Lin, almost accusingly. "And that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" David's voice was still calm, but now it carried a weight that made Victoria flinch. "Why should my wife need to announce her connection to wealth to be treated with basic human dignity? She came to your store as any other customer, asking for a simple service to have her grandmother's ring cleaned." Mei Lin touched David's arm gently. "It's okay," she said softly. "We can go somewhere else." But David wasn't finished. "My wife teaches kindergarten by choice," he announced to the now silent store. "She rides the subway, packs her own lunch, and spends most of her salary on supplies for her students. And while I'm speaking, let me make something clear. She's not humble or down to earth for a rich person. She's just a good person, period." The women who had been recording earlier now looked mortified, their phones hanging limply at their sides. One of them was trying to discreetly delete the video she'd taken, but the damage was already done. Several had already been uploaded to social media. Victoria made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Mr. Wu, please, let me personally handle Mrs. Wu's ring. No charge, of course. And please, let me show you both our newest collection." "I don't think that will be necessary," David replied. He turned to address the entire store. "My wife came here today to have a family heirloom cleaned, a ring that survived war, immigration, and decades of hard work. A ring that represents real value, not the kind you keep in display cases, but the kind you carry in your heart." A young sales associate in the back began to cry quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The security guard who had been called to remove Mei Lin was now standing at attention, his face a mask of professional neutrality, but his eyes showed respect as he looked at the couple. "David," Mei Lin said quietly, still holding her grandmother's ring wrapped in its soft cloth. "Let's go. These aren't the kind of people I want touching my grandmother's ring anyway." Her words, spoken softly but clearly, seemed to hit harder than any angry outburst could have. Victoria physically recoiled as if she'd been slapped. The other customers, who had been watching the scene unfold like a TV drama, suddenly seemed to realize their own role in the humiliation, and several headed for the exits. As David and Mei Lin turned to leave, a young woman rushed forward from behind one of the counters. Her name tag identified her as Joy, and unlike her colleagues, her face showed genuine remorse. "Mrs. Wu," she called out softly. "I know a wonderful jeweler in the Diamond District. She specializes in vintage pieces and treats everyone with respect. Please, let me give you her card. Mei Lin turned back and accepted the card with a gentle smile. Thank you, Joy. That's very kind of you. As they walked toward the door, David paused for one final moment. Victoria, he said, not turning around, you'll be hearing from the building's management tomorrow. You see, I don't just own Wu Innovations, I own this building too. And I think it's time for some changes in tenant policies. The sound of their footsteps on the marble floor echoed through the silent store as they left. Through the glass doors, they could see photographers already gathering. News traveled fast in New York, especially when it involved one of the city's most prominent businessmen defending his wife against discrimination. But Mei Lin wasn't thinking about the photographers or the impending social media storm. She was thinking about her students and how tomorrow she would have another real-life lesson to share with them about treating everyone with kindness and respect, regardless of how they look or what they wear. As they walked away from Elite Gems, David squeezed her hand. I'm sorry your grandmother's ring didn't get cleaned today. Mei Lin squeezed back. Actually, I think it's shining brighter than ever. She held up the wrapped ring, catching the afternoon sunlight. Some things don't need polish to show their true value. Outside Elite Gems, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Fifth Avenue as curious onlookers gathered to watch the unfolding scene. Several phones were pointed at David and Mei Lin, but instead of the mocking recordings from inside the store, these captured something entirely different, a husband and wife walking hand in hand, their dignity intact despite the humiliation they just endured. A young reporter from the local news station rushed up, microphone in hand. Mr. Wu, is it true that your wife was discriminated against at Elite Gems? Will you be pressing charges? More reporters appeared, drawn by the commotion and the rare sight of David Wu making an unscheduled public appearance. David gently guided Mei Lin through the growing crowd, his hand protective at her back. No comments right now, he said firmly but politely. Today is my wedding anniversary, and I'm focusing on celebrating with my wife. As they walked down Fifth Avenue, Mei Lin noticed something extraordinary happening. Store workers, delivery people, and pedestrians who normally went unnoticed by the elite shoppers were stopping to watch them pass. Some nodded in respect, others smiled encouragingly. A street vendor selling hot dogs raised his paper cup in a salute. Your story is already trending, David said softly, showing Mei Lin his phone. The videos from inside Elite Gems had indeed gone viral, but not in the way the original filmers had intended. Instead of mocking a supposedly poor woman, they showed the moment when prejudice and privilege were exposed for what they were. A taxi driver humped and waved as he passed. Hey, Mrs. Wu, you teach my nephew Andy. He loves your class. Mei Lin waved back, smiling as she remembered Andy's enthusiasm for their recent science project about growing beans. They turned down a quieter side street, away from the cameras and curious onlookers. David stopped and turned to face his wife. I'm sorry I didn't get there sooner, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I was in the private viewing room, setting up your anniversary surprise when I heard the commotion. Mei Lin reached up to straighten his tie, a gesture she'd done countless times over their 3 years of marriage. You got there exactly when you needed to, she assured him. But you didn't have to reveal everything about us. I know how much you value our privacy. David shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. Maybe it's time people knew the truth, not just about who we are, but about what really matters. He pulled out his phone again, showing her the comments flooding social media. This is why you never judge someone by their clothes. That teacher just taught everyone on Fifth Avenue a lesson in class, and I don't mean social class. The look on that manager's face when she realized who Mrs. Wu was equals price-ls. Mei Lin couldn't help but laugh at some of the comments, but then she saw one that made her pause. Mrs. Wu could have been shopping in designer clothes and showing off her wealth, but instead she spends her money on her students. That's real class. A message popped up from the principal of Rainbow Kids Elementary. Mei Lin, your students' parents are sharing the video. They're all so proud to have you as their children's teacher. You've shown our students what real strength looks like. David squeezed her hand. Speaking of your students, what will you tell them tomorrow? Mei Lin thought for a moment, watching people pass by on the street, office workers heading home, tourists with shopping bags, construction workers ending their day. Each person with their own story, their own worth, regardless of what they wore or carried. I'll tell them what I always do, she said finally. That every person deserves respect, that kindness matters more than money, and that true value isn't about what you own, but about how you treat others. A cool breeze rustled the trees lining the street, carrying the sounds of the city, honking horns, distant sirens, snippets of conversation, all blending into the unique symphony of New York. Maylin looked at her husband, still handsome in his business suit, but with his tie slightly crooked from their hasty exit. "You know what?" she said, a playful smile spreading across her face. "I think I know exactly where I want to go for our anniversary dinner." David raised an eyebrow. "Not the fancy restaurant I reserved." "No," Maylin said, tugging his hand. "Remember that little noodle shop where we had our first date? The one where you pretended to be just a tech guy and helped me plan my school fundraiser." David's face lit up with understanding. "The place where you spilled hot tea all over my laptop, and you didn't even get mad," Maylin laughed. "You just said it was a sign you needed to take a break from work anyway." As they walked toward the subway station, yes, even David Wu took the subway when he was with Maylin. People were still stealing glances at them, some recognizing them from the viral videos, others simply noticing a well-dressed businessman and a woman in simple clothes walking hand in hand. "You know," David said as they descended the subway stairs, "I had planned to give you something special at Elite Gems today. A surprise I've been planning for months." Maylin squeezed his hand. "Whatever it is, it can wait. Right now, I just want some noodles with my husband, talking about everything and nothing, just like we did on our first date." As they swiped their standard Metro cards and waited for the train, David's phone kept buzzing with messages from his PR team, board members, and journalists. He silenced it without looking. Some things were more important than business empires and public images. The subway car was crowded with the usual mix of people heading home. A young mother struggling with a stroller caught Maylin's eye, and without hesitation, she offered her seat. The mother smiled gratefully, not knowing she was giving up her seat to the wife of one of the city's wealthiest men. But that was exactly how Maylin wanted it, to be judged by her actions, not her bank account. The small noodle shop tucked away in a quiet corner of the city felt worlds apart from the glittering displays of Elite Gems. Steam rose from bowls of handmade noodles as David and Maylin sat at the same corner table where they'd first gotten to know each other 3 years ago. "Uncle Lee." Maylin called out warmly to the elderly shop owner who was arranging bowls behind the counter. "Look who I brought." The old man's face creased into a wide smile. "Ah, my favorite couple. Anniversary dinner, yes." He hobbled over to their table, wiping his hands on his well-worn apron. "I saw you both on my phone just now. My granddaughter showed me the video. You stood up to those rich snobs, very good." David couldn't help but chuckle. "Uncle Lai, you know I'm one of those rich people too, right?" The old man waved his hand dismissively. No. Rich here," he pointed to his head, and here he pointed to his heart. "That's why you eat my noodles instead of fancy restaurant. You understand real value." As Uncle Lee shuffled back to prepare their usual order, he hadn't even needed to ask what they wanted. Other customers in the small restaurant began to recognize them. Some tried to secretly take photos, while others openly stared. But unlike the mocking stares at Elite Gems, these looks held admiration and respect. A young waitress approached their table nervously. "Mrs. Wu," she said quietly, "I'm studying to be a teacher too. What you did today, it gives me hope that I can make a difference someday, even if I'm not from a wealthy family." Maylin smiled warmly. "What's your name?" "Jun," the waitress replied. "Well, Jun, let me tell you how I really started teaching," Maylin said, gesturing for the girl to pull up a chair. David sat back, watching his wife with pride. He'd heard this story before, but he never tired of it. 6 years ago, I was fresh out of college, drowning in student loans, Maylin began. I got offered 2 jobs, one at a prestigious private school with a huge salary, and another at Rainbow Kids Elementary, where many students couldn't even afford lunch. Jun leaned forward, completely forgetting about her other tables. Other customers had gone quiet too, listening intently. "I chose Rainbow Kids," Maylin continued, because during my interview, a little boy ran into the principal's office crying. His only pencil had broken, and he was worried he couldn't do his homework. The principal opened her desk drawer and pulled out a box of pencils she'd bought with her own money. David reached across the table and squeezed her hand, remembering how passionate she'd been when she first told him the story over spilled tea and laptop cleanup. "That's the day I realized where I needed to be," Mei Lin said. "I took the job, lived in a tiny apartment, and spent half my salary on classroom supplies. Then one day, while fundraising for our art program, I spilled tea all over this guy's laptop." She gestured to David with a grin. "Best laptop accident of my life," David added, making everyone laugh. Jun wiped a tear from her eye. "But now that you're married to Mr. Wu, you could teach anywhere. Why stay at Rainbow Kids?" Mei Lin's expression grew serious, because nothing has changed. Those kids still need dedicated teachers. Their worth isn't measured by their parents' bank accounts, just like my worth isn't measured by my husband's success. Uncle Lei returned with steaming bowls of noodles, having heard the whole conversation. "You see," he said to June, "real wealth." He pointed to Mei Lin's hut again. David cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "What most people don't know," he said, "is that the real reason I fell in love with Mei Lin wasn't just her kindness or her dedication to teaching. It was because she showed me what I'd been missing in my own life." The small restaurant had gone completely silent now. Even the cooks in the kitchen had paused to listen. "I had built Wu Innovations from nothing," David continued. "Started in my garage, worked 18-hour days, finally made it big. But I was just chasing numbers on a screen. Mei Lin taught me that true innovation isn't just about technology, it's about making life better for real people." He pulled out his phone and showed everyone a photo of Mei Lin's classroom. "See that computer station in the corner? That was from our first date." Mei Lin mentioned that her students had to share one old computer. She wasn't asking for help, she was just passionate about giving her kids the best education possible. "The next day, I had my company donate a full computer lab to the school. But I did it anonymously because she'd made it clear she wasn't interested in wealthy donors who wanted recognition." Mei Lin blushed, remembering how she'd eventually figured out who had made the donation. "I was so mad at you," she laughed. "I thought you were just trying to show off." "Instead, she made me volunteer to teach the kids basic coding," David grinned. "That's when I really fell in love, watching her help these young minds discover new possibilities." Uncle Lai had tears in his eyes now. "This," he exclaimed, "this is the story people should know. Not about rich man and poor teacher, about two good hearts finding each other." The other customers in the restaurant broke into spontaneous applause. Jun was furiously taking notes on her order pad, as if she was recording every word of wisdom for her future teaching career. "The thing is," Mei Lin said, addressing everyone in the restaurant now, "what happened at Elite Gems today wasn't just about rich versus poor. It was about seeing the true value in people. Every single one of my students has unlimited potential. My job isn't just to teach them reading and math, it's to make sure they never let anyone make them feel small." David pulled up another video on his phone, this one from a few months ago. It showed Mei Lin's class putting on a science fair in the school gymnasium. Kids from all backgrounds proudly showed off their projects, their faces glowing with confidence and joy. "This is real wealth," he said, echoing Uncle Lee's words. "And I'm not just talking about the children. Look at their parents. Some came in business suits straight from their office jobs, others came in work uniforms or clothes from their manual labor jobs. But every single one of them stood tall and proud, watching their children shine." As they finished their noodles, more people had gathered outside the restaurant's windows, word having spread about where the famous couple from the viral video had gone for their anniversary dinner. But inside, it remained a peaceful bubble of warmth and authenticity. "You know what the best part is?" Mei Lin said to Jun, who was still sitting with them, her other tables now being covered by her co-workers. "Tomorrow, I'll go back to my classroom, and my students won't care about viral videos or social media drama. They'll just want to know if we're still going to do our planned art project with recycled materials. And I'll go back to running my company," David added, but with an even stronger commitment to our education initiatives. because today reminded me that true change doesn't start in boardrooms, it starts in classrooms like Mylan's, where every child learns they have value, regardless of what they wear or where they come from. By the next morning, the story had exploded across social media. As Mei Lin prepared for her class, her phone kept buzzing with notifications. The video from Elite Gems had been viewed millions of times, spawning countless reactions, discussions, and think pieces about privilege, prejudice, and what truly defines a person's worth. She walked into Rainbow Kids Elementary just like any other day, carrying her usual tote bag filled with teaching supplies. But today was different. Parents dropping off their children stopped to give her encouraging smiles. Mr. Rodriguez, the newspaper vendor, had saved every paper that covered the story. "Look at this, Ms. May," he called out proudly, showing her the headlines. "Tech Billionaire's teacher wife exposes elite store's prejudice. Hidden heiress or humble teacher. The truth behind the viral video. Fifth Avenue scandal sparks nationwide conversation." Inside her classroom, Mei Lin found a surprise waiting. Her students had made a giant card, decorated with colorful drawings and wobbly handwriting. "We love you, Ms. Lin." Little Aisha, whose mother worked as a cleaner, had drawn a picture of Mei Lin wearing a crown made of books instead of jewels. "Ms. Lin." The children rushed to hug her. "We saw you on TV. You're famous." Mei Lin gathered them for their morning circle time. "Should we talk about what happened yesterday?" she asked gently. 25 little heads nodded eagerly. "My mommy said those mean ladies were wrong to judge you," said Tommy, whose father drove a taxi. "She said we should never judge people by their clothes." "That's right," Mei Lin smiled. "But you know what? This isn't just about clothes or money. It's about treating everyone with kindness and respect. Remember our classroom rule. The children chorus together. Everyone has something special to share." Meanwhile, across town, the consequences of yesterday's incident were unfolding at Elite Gems. Victoria arrived at work to find a notice of immediate termination, along with a complete overhaul of store policies. The building's management, controlled by Wu Innovations, had implemented new anti-discrimination guidelines for all retail tenants. David's phone rang during a board meeting. It was Joy, the kind sales associate from Elite Gems who had helped them. "Mr. Wu," she said nervously, "I just got promoted to store manager. They said you specifically recommended me for the position." "Because you showed real leadership yesterday," David replied. "Send me your ideas for making the store more welcoming to everyone. I want Elite Gems to become an example of how high-end retail can maintain excellence without losing humanity." The story continued to spread. Other luxury stores along Fifth Avenue began posting signs. "All customers welcome and respect is our highest value." Some cynics called it PR damage control, but real changes were happening behind the scenes. By lunchtime, Mei Lin's classroom had become an unexpected center of learning about social justice, at a kindergarten level, of course. The children were making drawings about kindness and sharing stories about times they felt judged or left out. "My big sister says I can't play basketball because I'm too small," said little Kevin, looking sad. "Well," Mei Lin responded, "should we all go to the playground later and show how everyone can play together, no matter their size?" The children cheered, and soon the playground was filled with kindergartners teaching each other different ways to enjoy basketball, from traditional playing to creative new games they invented themselves. During recess, the school principal visited Mei Lin's classroom. "The education board called," she said. "They want to use your story to develop a new curriculum about inclusivity and respect. They're also investigating reports of discrimination in other schools." Mei Lin thought about all the times she'd seen parents treated differently at school events based on their appearances or jobs. "Maybe this can help change things," she said hopefully. That afternoon, as Mei Lin was helping her students with their art projects, a delivery arrived. It was a package from the kind jeweler Joy had recommended, along with a note. "Your grandmother's ring has been cleaned, free of charge. Thank you for teaching all of us a valuable lesson." The ring sparkled beautifully, but Mei Lin noticed something else. The jeweler had included a second package with basic jewelry cleaning kits for each of her students. "So they can keep their treasures shining," the note read, "because every child's treasures are valuable." Outside the school, reporters were still trying to get interviews, but they were held back by an unexpected group, local parents and shopkeepers who had formed a protective circle around the school. Mr. Rodriguez had organized them, saying, "This is our teacher, our neighbor. Let her do her job in peace." Social media continued to buzz with updates. Victoria's rude treatment had been condemned by luxury brands worldwide. Elite Gems' parent company announced a complete retraining program for all employees, focusing on respect and inclusion. But the most powerful response came from everyday people sharing their own stories of being judged or discriminated against. The hashtag #SeeTheRealm started trending, with people posting photos of themselves in their work clothes alongside their achievements and dreams. A group of Mei Lin's former students, now in high school, started a campaign called Teachers Who Changed My Life, sharing stories about educators who had believed in them regardless of their background. As the school day ended, parents arrived to pick up their children. Today, they walked a little taller, smiled a little broader. The incident at Elite Gems had reminded them that worth isn't measured in dollars or designer labels. Tomorrow, Mei Lin announced to her class as they packed up, "We're going to start a new project. We'll make our own store where everyone is welcome. What should we call it?" Little Aisha raised her hand excitedly. "Rainbow Store, because rainbows have all the colors and they're all beautiful." Mei Lin wrote it down, her grandmother's freshly cleaned ring catching the light. She thought about how a simple trip to a jewelry store had sparked a movement about human dignity and respect. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from unexpected places. 1 month after the Elite Gems incident, Mei Lin's classroom had transformed into a miniature rainbow store, just as her students had suggested. Cardboard boxes became elegant display cases, painted in every color imaginable. Construction paper turned into fancy price tags where values were listed not in dollars, but in kind actions. 1 toy card equals 3 friendly smiles, and pretty necklace equals helping someone in need. The project had caught the attention of local news stations, who came to film the children's unique take on retail. Little Denny, wearing a paper bowtie, demonstrated how he welcomed customers. "Welcome to Rainbow Store. Everyone is special here." David stopped by during lunch break, carrying a mysterious box. The children crowded around him excitedly. They'd grown used to his visits over the past month. "Mr. Wu, did you bring more coding games?" they asked eagerly. "Even better," he smiled, opening the box to reveal dozens of small, wrapped packages. "These are for our grand store opening." Each package contained a simple crystal prism, nothing expensive, but when the children held them up to the light, rainbows danced across the classroom walls. "Now everyone has their own rainbow to take home," Mei Lin explained. "To remember that beauty comes in all forms." The classroom project had sparked something bigger than anyone expected. Other teachers began adopting similar ideas, using play-based learning to teach children about respect and inclusion. The school's hallways filled with artwork and stories about kindness and acceptance. At Wu Innovations, David had made some changes too. The company launched a new education initiative, providing technology and resources to underfunded schools. But more importantly, they started a mentorship program where employees volunteered in classrooms across the city. "Your wife's story changed how I see things," one of David's top executives admitted during a meeting. "Yesterday, I took my daughter shopping, and she asked why I was being rude to the sales assistant. It made me realize I needed to do better." The ripple effects continued to spread. Elite Gems, under Joy's new management, had become a model for inclusive luxury retail. The store now hosted monthly events where people could bring in family heirlooms for free cleaning and restoration advice, regardless of their appearance or background. One afternoon, as Mei Lin was helping her students clean up their rainbow store, a familiar face appeared at the classroom door. Uncle Lee from the noodle shop, leaning on his walking stick. "Uncle Lee!" the children shouted. They knew him from the story Mei Lin had shared about her first date with David. The old man shuffled in, carrying a large thermos. "I bring special noodle soup for story time," he announced. "Good food makes good stories better." As the children sat in a circle, enjoying their surprise treat, Uncle Lai shared stories about his own journey as an immigrant, starting his small shop, and how kindness from strangers had helped him succeed. The children listened intently, slurping noodles and asking questions. "Did people judge you because of your old clothes?" Tommy asked between bites. Uncle Lai chuckled. "Yes, many times. But good heart more important than good clothes. Look at Ms. Me and Mr. Wu. They teach us this. Later that day, during the parent-teacher conference, Mei Lin noticed something remarkable. Parents who previously had been hesitant to participate due to their work clothes or limited English were now actively engaging, sharing ideas and volunteering for school events. You showed us it's okay to be ourselves, one mother said, still wearing her hospital cleaning uniform. My daughter used to be embarrassed when I came to school in my work clothes. Now she tells everyone her mama helps keep people healthy. The conference room walls displayed photographs from the past month. Children playing in their rainbow store, parents sharing their jobs and cultures, community members teaching special skills. Among them was a picture from the Elite Gems incident, but it wasn't the viral moment of confrontation. Instead, it showed what happened after: Mai Lin and David eating noodles at Uncle Lee's shop, surrounded by ordinary people sharing stories and hope. As the sun set on another school day, Mai Lin gathered her things, her grandmother's ring catching the light. The simple gold band had become something of a symbol now, not of wealth or status, but of staying true to oneself. David waited outside in his usual spot, having walked from his office instead of taking the car. They still rode the subway home together most days, part of their commitment to living authentically. "Ready for our anniversary dinner?" he asked with a smile. "Uncle Lee's again?" Actually, David grinned. "I was thinking we could host dinner at our apartment this time. I invited your entire class and their families." Uncle Lee's bringing the noodles, and Joy from Elite Gems asked if she could come too. Mei Lin's eyes widened. "Our tiny apartment, for that many people." "Well," David scratched his head sheepishly, "I thought maybe it's time to let them see the real us, not just the humble teacher and the tech billionaire, but two people who believe in building bridges between different worlds." As they walked to the subway station, hand in hand, they passed Elite Gems. The window display had changed. Now it showcased a mix of precious gems alongside photographs of family heirlooms and their stories. In the center was a simple caption: "Every jewel has a story. Every person has value." A group of schoolchildren pressed their faces against the glass, pointing excitedly. The security guard, the same one who had been called to remove Mei Lin, now stood at the door with a welcoming smile, greeting everyone who entered with equal respect. "You know what?" Mei Lin said, squeezing David's hand. "Our apartment might be small, but I think it's perfect for bringing people together, just like my classroom." And so, their story became not just about a moment of humiliation turned to triumph, but about the countless small changes that rippled out into the world, one heart at a time. In Mei Lin's classroom, in Uncle Lee's noodle shop, in the holds of Wu Innovations, and yes, even in Elite Gems, people learned to look past the surface and see the true gems within each person they met.